Hi, and welcome back to Lisa's Stamp Studio. There's a brand new suite of products called Peony Garden in the new annual catalog that caught my eye. And we're going to create a double gatefold card that looks like this. I'm going to teach you lots of tips about the opening for this card, as well as tips about the dimensions and the scoring for the card fold itself. You're going to find pictures, cutting dimensions, and supplies down in the video description below. You'll scroll down and you'll find a link there that's going to lead you over to the blog post. And if this is your first time visiting my channel, I would love to have you subscribe. Click the subscribe button below and make sure you click that bell icon that's next to it so you'll get notifications when I'm live right here on YouTube, as well as when I share a new video. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's card. The gorgeous Peony Garden Designer Series paper is double-sided, giving you lots of options. While you may have seen this fold before, I actually changed the dimensions for this so that it can be housed on a base of cardstock to be a bit sturdier, because typically it's made just with Designer Series paper. And because I know the scoring is going to be very difficult for you to see on this pattern, I decided that I'm going to do that for you on a piece of Whisper White cardstock. In addition to that, I have a full photo template for you over on my website at lisasstampstudio.com. You're going to find a link down in the video description below. One of the reasons I love the Stampin' Trimmer is not only because of the scoring and the cutting blades that are both included. They do navigate up and down out of the way so you can keep them on the track at the same time. But it also has this extension arm, which means you're going to get tons more room in order to score or cut. We're going to be using the light blade for scoring, and I've got that piece of white paper here. Remember, this is just so that you can see the cutting dimensions. The first score line is going to be at 2 inches. One of the reasons I love this trimmer is because the lines actually go all the way down the trimmer, making it easy to make sure your paper is aligned, as well as a straight edge here at the top. So the first scoring line is going to be at 2 inches. The next one is going to be at 4 inches. We're going to scoot all the way over to the 8-inch mark. And our final one is going to be here at the 10-inch mark. This Designer Series paper has been scored ahead of time, just like I showed you. You're going to have 2 score lines here on either side. So those are going to get scored to the inside. Then what you're going to do is you're going to fold these other flaps out. I'm just going to suggest that you make sure that they're well aligned at the top and the bottom. I do recommend your bone folder for those nice crisp edges on your cards as well as your Designer Series paper, especially if you're working with 3D projects or fun folds like this one. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to measure down 2 1/2 inch on either side here so that we can create an angled cut from that area to the top of this first fold. The easiest way for me to do that is to use these large grid sheets, which I absolutely love because there's both a ruler on the side as well as the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that folded card and I'm going to lay it here. I'm going to line it up on the left side and the bottom, making sure that it's straight. And I've got a pencil here, and I'm going to mark off at 2 1/2 inches and make a pencil mark here. Now I know that's going to be very difficult to see in the video, but I don't want that to be obtrusive when the card is done. I'm going to follow this line right up the grid paper, which is going to make it super easy for you to make sure that it's even. So that's this grid line right here, and I'll leave another tick line here. So you'll see we have marks on both sides. We're going to come back to the trimmer, and now what we're going to do is I've opened up the card, and we are going to cut on a diagonal from that tick mark up to this first score line, which is going to leave us an uneven triangle. We're going to need the cutting blade for that, so I'm just going to navigate that down out of the way so that it's ready. And then what I'll do is I'm going to pivot this so that my tick mark is here, lined up with this gray line here in the cutting track, which is where the blade will travel. And I'm looking to line up the top of that score line, which I know is going to be very difficult for you to see because of the pattern paper. Once I have that aligned, I'll go in and I'll just cut that away. And that now is going to leave us this piece, and you're going to want to save this. Now we're going to turn this, and we're going to do the exact same thing on this side. So I've got my tick mark here, and I'm looking to make sure that this crease, which is here, is going to fall inside the track. I wanted to bring in the photo template for you as well so that you can actually see very well what I've done. 2 1/2 inches with a tick mark, and then you're going to cut from here to here, and that's on both sides, which is represented here. Again, we're going to go ahead and just fold this. Now these 2 pieces that you cut off are actually going to become very, very important. I'm going to flip them over and they will get adhered here near the bottom, 1 on each side. It should look like this is a diamond pattern when it's finished. Let's go ahead and adhere these. I'll be using my silicone craft sheet, which is one of my very favorite accessories in my stamp studio. Adhesive, liquid glue, and hot glue will not stick to it. Make sure you put the adhesive on the correct side because we want this side facing up. The great thing about the silicone craft sheet, it's going to allow me to get in those little tiny areas without having it fall on my work surface. It's going to keep this nice and clean. I'll open this up to make this easier for my hand and for you to see. And then I'm going to line up the bottom edge the best that I can and the outside edge. We're going to do the same thing now with this end. So we're going to flip this over and add adhesive. This now is going to go on this end. Once it's adhered, you can close this up and you'll see that beautiful diamond pattern. Now let's go ahead and talk about the decorating and of course the inside of this card. I have a piece of thick Whisper White cardstock here, and this is where I'm going to stamp my image. And because I didn't want to take away from that beautiful subtle paper, I decided to use basic gray ink. This gorgeous peony image is from a suite of products called Peony Garden. Here is the stamp set, beautiful photographic type images, as well as some greetings. The great thing is it also has coordinating dies, one of which we'll use today. Because the image is rather large, I prefer to turn the stamp face up on my work surface and ink it this way. That's going to ensure that I don't miss a spot. Then we'll go ahead and stamp that here. Make sure you take your time and you trace out the image so you get a really good impression. Our next step is to color it. I do have one that's completely finished for you, but I do want to walk you through a little bit of the coloring that I used on my card so that you'll know how I achieved it. I'm going to be using the Stampin' Blends Petal Pink. There is a light and the dark shade that come in this combination. Depending on the size of the area that you're coloring, you'll have a choice of tips. This is the brush tip and this is the chisel tip. I'm going to use the brush tip today, and I'm going to lay color where there's mostly shading here. So I'm just going to do a small area of this to give you an idea of how I colored it in. Now that the light color is down, I'm going to come in with the darker shade of that same color, and I'm going to concentrate mostly down in the shaded area. It's going to add a little bit of pigmentation, but not make this so bold that it takes away from the beauty of this flower. Now, because this is such a small area of color, because I did want to leave some of this white, you have two options. You can leave it the way it is, which is what I did. But if you find you have an area that's really, really harsh between one color and the next, you can go back to the lightest shade and you can pull the dark and the light together to blend those out. Once this image was finished being colored, I was able to use the coordinating die set to die cut that image. And that's exactly what I did with the flower that's here. The leaves were colored in with the soft seafoam combination for a really beautiful and subtle look for the focal point of this card. To house that image, I die cut a scalloped square, and this came from one of my favorite die sets. This is the Layering Squares dies. You're going to see that you have graduated sizes of regular squares as well as scallops. I did use the largest scallop square that was inside this combination. I am going to turn the cardstock on the diagonal, and I'm going to bring in one of these beautiful square vellum doilies. Now, there's no reason to adhere the doily because we are going to add dimensionals to the back side of this, which is going to stick right through this doily and hold this in place. I'll take off several of my dimensionals and we'll place these on the back side of our flower. I've removed the paper backings and now we're ready to add this to this diagonal square. I'm going to position this where I want it, just making sure that my doily is aligned, and then we'll tack that in place. Make sure you give it a good tap and press those dimensionals down to hold that doily layer. Let's go ahead and stamp the inside of the card. I'll be using the basic gray ink for this to coordinate, and I've chosen the words from that same stamp set, "My thoughts are with you," and we're going to ink that up. I'm going to stamp that here near the top. I'm going to use the Petal Pink ink to stamp one of the smaller peonies from that stamp set, just to bring in some color and coordination. Since I know that's going to hang outside the surface, I want to make sure I protect that. And I'm going to ink this up and I'll stamp that here. Now we're ready to assemble. You'll recall I said that I made this a little bit shorter so that it can be housed on a cardstock base. This is thick Whisper White. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to add adhesive here to the back side. That now will get mounted right here to the center of the card base. The insert that we created, we're going to go ahead and attach this as well. This is going to go to the inside of that designer paper. So I'm opening it up and I'm looking to make sure that I'm going to stay within the perimeter of those score lines. And then we'll tack that in place. Now we're ready to go ahead and finish the outside. Now we're going to adhere this piece, and we are going to place it on the diagonal. You'll notice you'll only want to place dimensionals on this one side. So I'm going to flip this over, keeping this area in mind, and I'll place one here. The other two that I'm going to place, I'm going to keep them relatively close because I want to make sure they're not going to fall to the inside of my card. And then we'll remove those paper backings. This now is going to get positioned here in the center. Before I go too far, I like to check to make sure that my dimensionals will not show, and then we can tack that in place. Now I have two other steps I want to share with you. I added the beautiful wink of Stella and some embellishments. This is a shimmer pen and I absolutely love the way it works. You just swirl right over your image or brush it on the areas that you want and it's going to give it a beautiful shimmer look. Now it does have an alcohol base in it, so you'll need to give it a couple seconds for that to dry. Finally, from that coordinating suite of products, I'm using the Elegant Faceted Gems. These are beautiful. These are clear, there's some that are white, and there are some that coordinate with this paper. They already have glue dots on the back, so I'm going to pick up one of those, and I'll place one here near the bottom left. I'll place another here at the top right, and I'll choose a smaller one here to create a little bit of a diagonal interest here at the top. There we go. We have our double gatefold card. Here is the card we created together today and the one I created before you joined me. If you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and you are interested in receiving a copy of the new annual catalog, you can request one over at lisastampstudio.com and click on catalogs. And if you've enjoyed today's video, would you please give it a thumbs up here on YouTube, which is a like, it certainly helps. And I look forward to having you join me next time. Have a great day.